Hey everybody, it's Mr. Second Amendment, and basically I just wanted to do this video to show you the anatomy of the three major types of shotgun shells that you are going to encounter. And of course, one of the most useful parts of a shotgun, one of the reasons why people buy it and have them, is because it can shoot many different types of munitions, the three of which is what we're looking at right now. I basically wanted to add some numbers and some thoughts, and basically just have you take a look at what each one is comprised of, so you can basically see for yourself what's going on here. Just to make an introduction, this is BIRDSHOT, of course, as you can see. Now this happens to be a state. It's 1 1/8 ounce, number 8 shot, 2 3/4 inch shell, 2 3/4 dram. That's your very basic. Some people might use it for trap, but a lot of people are going to use that for skeet, maybe possible dove hunting, but maybe not. It's not really fast enough for that. But generally speaking, this is going to be a very common target kind of load, and you're going to see that at pretty much any shotgun shooting range. Next thing we have here, this happens to be federal. It's 2 3/4 inch double-aught buckshot. There are 9 pellets, and we're going to go into the numbers pretty soon here, but these are basically just 9 pellets that are flying out instead of our little tiny pellets, and we'll go into the diameters and all that stuff. And you see this most commonly, of course, in deer hunting, which is why I call it buckshot. Also defense, you're going to see this as a very standard military and law enforcement cartridge, and very many people recommend that for home defense. So that's why I brought it out here, because you've probably heard the phrase, or you've heard people throw around the word or phrase double-aught buckshot. So there it is. We'll go into that. And then on the right, this is a Winchester 3-inch magnum rifled slug. And this is just kind of an example. Of course, they make the 2 3/4 inch slugs. I happen to like the 3-inch. I think we're going to talk about the ballistics, but I think it ends up being my favorite in terms of the numbers and whatnot. Okay, so basically I'm going to show you my math sheet here. You can kind of see all my stuff, breaking out the physics. If you're used to physics, P equals MV, that's basically, I did an equation. We're going to get into that. P equals MV. I want to quantify this or give you some numbers that kind of give you some ideas about what is the power that we're looking at here, or lack thereof, depending on what we're looking at. So first off, with the BIRDSHOT, it's 1 1/8 ounce of number 8 shot. There's approximately 458, 460 pellets of these little tiny BBs, and they're going to spill everywhere if I try to get them out. But you can see them. They're about 0.09 inches of diameter for each pellet. There's about, like I said, generally speaking, we're looking at about 458, 460 pellets in each shot shell. And each one is about 1.07 grains for a grand total of about, this whole thing, all the lead going down range, is about 491 grains. So that's what we're looking at right there. Okay, so moving on, and by the way, it's going at this particular load is about 1,145 feet per second. You can get them 1,200, 1,290. Your average basic load that I have here is going at about 1,145 feet per second. Okay, so moving on to the double-aught buckshot, we have 9 actual pellets here. They're each about 33, 34, 32, within usually about 33 is your average diameter, 33 caliber balls, 9 of those pellets, and each pellet is roughly about 60 grains. So the whole package of lead going down range with all 9 pellets, all 33 caliber balls, we're looking at about 535 grains going down range. So compare that to 491 grains versus your 535 grains of lead going down range per shot. And you know, that's part of the reason why I'm doing this video, just to interject real quick, is everyone says, oh, you know, BIRDSHOT, slugs, and buckshot, it's all the same at a certain range. Well, I wouldn't say so, and I'm trying to show you why. So let's keep moving here. Oh, by the way, this is going at about 1,300 feet per second. That's about generally your average buckshot load, give or take. Of course, it's all going to depend on if you get the magnums or the low recoils or what have you. All right, so now we're moving on to a magnum 3-inch rifled slug. And the whole package here is 437 grains going down range. It's pretty heavy. Now, just like I said, though, 491 grains, 535, and 437 grains. Okay, so out of all three, this has the less weight, the less mass of lead going downrange, but something we need to keep into account is it's one solid projectile and the feet per second. It's 1,700 feet per second. So we got about 1,145, we got about 1,300, so we got 1,700 feet per second. Okay, so, you know, that is definitely, when I bust out the calculator, I'll show you my results here, that's definitely going to come into play in terms of the velocity. And, okay, so moving on, velocity, of course, right now I'm looking at momentum. I think momentum would get you a good idea of basically what is going on here. And momentum is P equals mv. I'll show you that. P equals mv, where P is momentum, that's in kilograms per meter second, where m is mass in kilograms, and v equals velocity in meters per second. So basically, I don't want to overcomplicate this, I just want to give you some raw numbers, but I just did the basic momentum calculation, and let's just go down the list. So for birdshot, we have the momentum is 11.10 kilograms per meter second, which converted to pounds, that's 24.47 pounds per meter second. Okay, so you may not have much basis as to, you know, what that means, but just keep in mind momentum in the world of physics, that's a vector quantity, so it has both direction and magnitude. Okay, so that's why the units for that, 24.47 pounds per meter second. Okay, that's how much pounds is going down range in terms of force per meter per second. Okay, so 24.47 pounds per meter second. With the buckshot, we're at 30.29 pounds per meter second. And then with the slug, we're at 32.34 pounds per meter second. So there's generally about a 6 foot per meter second difference here, and then there's 2 here. So it's a little bit of an upgrade with the slug. But, you know, with the numbers aside, you know, it's not really going to give us the whole story, because obviously with our birdshot, we know that it starts to spread out over time. This is not one solid unit. It's not even a collection of larger diameter balls. It's just little tiny pellets, and immediately when they leave the barrel, they're starting to spread and lose velocity, lose energy. And then we have our buckshot, 9 of these here that are 33 caliber balls, 60 grains each. Just equivalent that to, or try to look into that, kind of along the lines of like a 9mm 115 grain. If it was about half the power of a 9mm, going about a little bit faster than that, it was all 9 of those shot in the same place at once and spreading out as it further goes along. And then we have the rifled slug at 437 grains. Now, to keep in mind, again, let's go back to how much lead is actually going downrange. For the birdshot, we have, again, we're looking at 458 pellets, individual little pellets, for a grand total of 491 grains of lead just going downrange. For the buckshot, we got 535 grains of lead going downrange. And then for the slug, we have 437 grains going downrange. Now in this particular example where I have 2 3/4 shells and then I have a 3-inch shell over here, it's going to skew the results a little bit as to what would necessarily be better. My personal thoughts are, you're thinking to yourself, Mr. Second Amendment, I'm starting to get confused. I really don't understand. Like, what is the situation? What should I use for home defense? And the real answer is, in my opinion, it's going to depend on where you live. If you live in a packed apartment building where there's many innocent lives packed in a very densely packed building where people are behind other walls and stuff, I would definitely shy away from something like a slug, because slugs have been known to puncture or rip through even parts of engine blocks, car doors, stuff like that. And there's a lot of power. Now, in a 12-inch hydraulic mass, and my next video is going to be probably ballistic gel or something like that. But in something like that, I can't imagine this is going to come out on the other side intact. And there's some other videos that show people shooting slugs at ballistic gel. But essentially, I still wouldn't use that for home defense, because if you miss, that thing is just going to keep going and going and going, especially a 3-inch magnum. So I probably would shy away from something like this. And then buckshot, we're looking at 9 pellets. Generally, as a rule of thumb, and what I've noticed in pretty much any shotgun, this is going to spread out about 1 inch for every yard. So at about 5 yards, the spread, as a rule of thumb, is generally going to be about 4 to 5 inches. And at 25 yards, it'll be about 25 inches, which is about 2 feet of spread. So, people think, oh, well, I use a shotgun because I don't have to be that precise. Well, if your target is 4 yards away, 3 yards away, which is a very realistic home defense distance, you're only doing about a 2 or 3 inch spread. So, I don't want to burst the bubble there, but I kind of do, because I want you to be aware that, people choose a shotgun, or especially a shotgun without a stock. It only has a pistol grip. Okay, those are very hard to control, and you have to aim them appropriately. It's very hard to do that. So, you got to keep in mind when you're using a shotgun, you got to keep all these things in mind. If you're in an apartment building or something like that, I'd probably recommend something like BIRDSHOT. I'd probably look into number 6, 7, probably go down to number 4 possibly, because as you go down on the graduated scale of number shot, you're going to get larger size pellets. So, that's something I would look into, but generally BIRDSHOT might be the solution, because one about a yard or two outside the barrel, all 3 of these shells is just a column of lead. Now the buckshot has the heaviest column, has the most mass at 535, and this has the second most at the 491 grains, and then this has the least at 437, but of course it's not the whole picture, because these are all going at different velocities. This is medium velocity, 1300. We're looking about 1145 on this, the lower end of the scale, and then we're looking at 1700, which is just screaming out of the barrel. So, tightly packed, I'd probably look into one of these two, but it's going to depend on where you live. Slugs generally are going to be used for larger animals. They're used at road checkpoints to disable speeding vehicles that aren't going to stop. And that's another thing, is let's actually check this out and look at what is going on. I'll go from right to left now. You'll actually notice on this slug, just like pretty much any slug, it's rifled, so it's going to do some spin in the barrel. Okay, but it's hollow. And you're going to be like, Mr. Second Amendment, what's up with that? Now, looking back at Civil War history to kind of, prevent you from getting a huge history lecture here, this has a very similar kind of situation as the Manet round, the Manet bullet, which people called the mini ball, but in reality it was the French officer Manet. He came up with a hollow bullet, so when you shoot it, the hot gases are going to fill in this hollow cap, and it's going to expand and grip into the barrel. And on a shotgun where you have a smooth bore, these rifled effects are actually going to spin this, so when it comes out of the barrel, it actually will. If you shoot slugs, rifled slugs, you'll actually see they're more accurate than you would probably think. So not only is it sealing the lead slug around the walls of the barrel itself, but it's gripping it for the rifling to make it spin. So not only does it shoot at maximum power and velocity, but it's doing it accurately. So it's a very ingenious thing that that French officer Manet came up with. We first really used it in the Civil War in proliferation with the mini ball. And still the same concept applies. It's kind of cool to look at. And you can see generally all 3 of these are working on the same concept. We have the bottom portion here, which is filled with powder. And then in this particular slug, we have, these are cardboard inserts really. And they're just there to kind of buffer and push along this slug with the maximum power. It's sealing itself against the barrel on many different levels, so it creates the no gases are lost. And actually, if you were to put this down a shotgun barrel, this actually drops right down the barrel. So as is, without expansion, without heat, without the moments of firing, just as it is right now, that does not seal against the barrel. And you'll see how that's contrary when you put the tip of a bullet down a rifle barrel. It'll get stuck and it doesn't want to go any further when you do the supposed bullet test. But with this, it'll just drop down a shotgun barrel. It requires the heat and velocity to properly seal. Some gases are going to filter through. They're going to get into this end cap and seal against the barrel. So that's what's going on in a slug. Moving on to buckshot, we basically have this cup here. I'm going to see if I can pull it out without spilling all of them. And oh, just lost a couple. But basically we have this cup, and this cup is being propelled by this power piston here. All the powder is packaged in here, and when the primer ignites, it pushes that piston, which pushes this whole cup down the barrel. Now what you're not seeing, and what I did not include, is when I took this apart, there was a bunch of white sandy material basically holding all of these pellets, all these balls together. And I think they did that just as filler. They didn't want to have these hollow, and I'm sure it would work just fine. They probably claim that by having all that sand material that it keeps all the balls together for as long as possible. Either way, that is what I found when I took it apart. But basically what you have to know is this cup will, this whole unit with all the buckshot in it will be pushed down the barrel, and of course this is going to seal against the barrel for maximum velocity, pushing against, and then when this leaves the barrel, of course the plastic wadding has very little mass compared to all 9 pellets, so this will get left behind relatively quickly. You'll actually see it come out of the gun many times, and then the pellets will continue on because they got more mass, so they're going to maintain that velocity for longer just because they have more mass. Okay, so carefully put that back in there. And generally speaking, you're going to also notice before I get to the birdshot that on your, I'm just going to let that one go, on your buckshot and slugs, you see what we call high brass, especially higher brass on this, and that is a metal buffer that is going to act as basically, you wouldn't shoot a 30-06 with the whole cartridge being plastic, would you? Well, the answer is no. That's why it's brass. This part here is actually cupping the powder, and that contains the powder within the cartridge, which is seated in the barrel. So it's just, it helps as a safety precaution, really. You'll see this is low brass because there's very little, there's a cardboard buffer, there's the powder within the brass area, there's the cardboard buffer, there's the power piston, here's the cup that's projecting all those BBs out, all those pellets out. So, you know, I can understand, I guess, to an extent, the argument where, you know, a yard or two past the muzzle of the barrel, you know, it's just all 3 of these are just a column of lead, but you know, very quickly after it goes out of the barrel, it's going to start to dissipate. You know, your shot is going to start to separate from all the pellets are going to start to separate from each other. On the buckshot, your 9 pellets are going to start to separate from each other. And then on the slug, of course, nothing separates, and it's going very fast. Even though it is lighter than the other 2 cartridges, it's going very fast, and there is no separation. So, generally speaking, that's what explains why a slug is going to do more damage, because it stays together versus buckshot, or especially birdshot, where it dissipates. The birdshot collectively has a good amount of mass, 491 grains, but the thing is, when that hits a target, okay, yeah, it's going to create damage, but none of these pellets are connected to each other permanently, and they don't have any mass really. They're about a grain each, maybe a little more than a grain, 1.07 grains per pellet. So generally, not only are they not sticking together, and they're not staying together, and especially over distance, that is certainly true, but they don't have much mass to begin with from a singular individual level. So that's why people usually use your buckshot for that kind of application. And again, slugs, you're going to see that in very serious hunting game. You're going to see that in checkpoints where you want to stop a vehicle and the vehicle is not stopping. You just aim for the engine block. So hopefully this kind of went over some numbers and gave you some ideas about, you know, what is going on with all these different types of shotgun shells and whatnot, and hopefully this helps you choose. I will say my home defense load is buckshot, and you don't need to get all crazy with the magnum buckshot. It's just 2 3/4 standard 12 gauge buckshot, and you know, I think that's going to be more than enough to solve the problem if someone's in the house. And you know, I have a buddy who is he works on an ambulance over on the East Coast, and he talks about, you know, what he sees with the various guns used and whatnot. And you know, he tells me if someone has been shot with a shotgun or a rifle, especially a 12 gauge shotgun, okay, we usually don't deal with that because there's really nothing that we could have done for that person. Usually when we show up, they're already gone. And this is very grim topics that we're talking about, but these are things that you should be thinking about, especially if you're using a shotgun, you know, for home defense within the household. But he said, yeah, with a shotgun, especially, you know, slugs, it's game over. You know, the amount of damage is just asinine compared to something like a pistol. But, you know, what I would do, just kind of moving away from that, I would take all 3 out and just shoot them, try them for yourself, and see what happens. So hopefully this has been informational. I'm gonna post my raw data all these numbers, all these calculations. I'm glad I paid attention in physics class in college, because I guess it came back to haunt me. But I'm going to post all of this in the comments if you really want to see a breakdown and analysis of what is going on here. And hopefully in the future I'm going to start doing some actual ballistic testing, or at least object testing with these. So again, thanks for watching, and comment for questions.